hope people feel the relationship today between like the government and the industry is not one built from hostility, is one built from like, we want to hear what you have to say. We may not always agree with you, but at least we have an open door policy. So I think success would be building a stable three-legged stool that we've accomplished all of the things that we've said we've done. We have market structure legislation that's been signed into law. We have genius legislation that's obviously been signed into law and that we have implemented. I think success in 5 years is we have a lot of the offshore entities or a lot of the US companies that have been built offshore come back into the United States. I think that is really important for making the US the crypto capital of the world.
I have one question that I think everybody wants to hear from Treasury right now, which is, are we buying Bitcoin or what? Like, is the U.S. government buying Bitcoin? Are we selling gold? What are we doing? Are we buying Bitcoin? What's the answer?
You're going to get me in some trouble here. I'd like to clarify for everyone, we're working to execute and implement the President's executive order to set up the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve and the digital asset stockpile. So I'm sure everyone in the room saw the Secretary's tweet last week. We're working to do it.
All right, I'll go back to the script now. All right. All right, so where are we now? We obviously, last year at this event, it was pre-election. There was a lot of questions about, first of all, who's going to win the presidency. You know, if Trump does win, there's obviously a lot of talk about him being more pro-crypto. Where have we come from a year ago, pre-election, pre-Trump administration, 2.0, to where we are now? What have we accomplished? What have we really accomplished?
I'm pretty biased, but I think we've accomplished a great deal in the first 6 months of the administration. I think the president got out there pretty early and established an aggressive and sort of tight time frame that he wanted to see core milestones accomplished. And as I think about the policy apparatus in Washington, it's sort of three legs of a stool to me. One, we have getting something done on stablecoins. We obviously have the Genius Act signed into law, which is a huge win. Now Treasury and the rest of the regulators under the Genius Act are working to implement and execute against that. So we have tons of work that we need to do in terms of issuing regulations and doing all the things to make it effectual. Then we have market structure legislation. A bunch of people have talked about it here, so I won't retrod that, but it's a core priority for the president, for the administration, to have durable legislation, to have market structure be vibrant in the United States. And if you think about what's going to make the US the crypto capital of the world, like, we need a framework for stablecoins, we need a framework for market structure, and it bolsters sort of the dual framework of states and the federal government together, and that's how we express our dominance in that. And then the last one, is, I think it's a little bit forgotten, is the Presidential Working Group on Digital Assets issued its 180-day report a couple weeks ago. And if you read the report, it covers everything from stablecoins to market structure to tax issues to banking reform issues to AML and BSA issues. So it covers the watershed of topics and matters that we want to accomplish. And if you flip to the back part of the report, there's, I think, 111 different recommendations in it. So executing and implementing all of the things that we said we would do, that's the other core piece of the stool from the policy apparatus.
Yeah, it's great, obviously, to see all the legislation moving along, but repealing SAB 121, DeFi broker rule, all low-hanging fruit that you guys have knocked out of the park.
Big wins. All of the hostile guidance that existed at the OCC and the Fed and the FDIC, like, those are gone. SAB 121's gone. The DeFi broker rule, which didn't make any sense, is gone.
Right.
So we have lots of things that we needed to clean up when we came in. So it's kind of a couple different phases, sort of the fixing the things that were problems and rebuilding from there. And we've projected a lot of things that we want to see accomplished, and now success will be actually going and doing all those things.
Right. And you talked about the Genius Act. So we had a major industry milestone. Genius Act gets passed. I think since the passage of that legislation, we've obviously seen sort of watershed moments in the industry. We saw a Circle IPO that's been extremely successful. We've seen institutional investors courting digital asset-related investments in a much more significant way. We've observed that on the Skybridge side. So how are you guys going about, on the Treasury side, approaching implementation? And do you think we'll see any concrete guidance on that before year end?
Well, we already put guidance out.
Yeah.
So you saw last week, or I think it was last week, we put out some requests for comment from the Terrorism and Financial Intelligence vertical at Treasury Department, talking about illicit finance and sort of innovative technologies to interdict. That was a requirement under Genius. I don't want to front run the rules and regs that we're going to do, but we have a lot of work. And if you read Genius, there's a lot of implementation deadlines that are set within it. So we have to execute against that. And success will be like putting out a public comment and getting the industry to feedback and then writing rules. That's sort of the typical process under the Administrative Procedure Act.
So we're in the great state of Wyoming, which I think is the crypto capital of America, which is now obviously the crypto capital of the world. But I live in New York. And those two states have a very different approach to regulating digital assets, one slightly more forward-thinking and pioneering than the other. And we, in general, have a patchwork of federal and state legislation around this industry. Do you think that's sustainable, or do you think we need to somehow create a unified regulatory framework for digital assets?
Well, I think it's a little bit nuanced. I think the dual licensing framework and the dual regulatory system that we've enjoyed in the United States and state and federal government works quite well in a variety of different industries. Like we've seen it work successfully in the banking industry. And I think if we want to have the most vibrant ecosystem in the United States, we need to have a dual track system for digital assets. So I think it's no different from that. I think the benefit of having a federal framework is it provides durable certainty. And I just heard the panel in the back of the room talking about whether or not the U.S. was behind the ball or we're in front of the ball now, where we are. I think it's just natural that if we have a federal framework that exists and is durable in the United States, it can withstand the test of time. It can withstand sort of the hostility and sort of the evolution of different administrations. So if we do that, it expresses our leadership to the rest of the world and tells them that we're going to build the future of capital markets and the future of finance in the United States. And just as we did in the post-depression era, when we set up the SEC and we set up the secondary market infrastructure in the United States that exists now, it's because we had durable law that we have the deepest and most liquid capital markets in the world, and everyone wants to buy our debt. That's what we should do in this space as well.
And thinking globally, obviously before the U.S. got its house in order on digital asset regulation, people were flocking to different jurisdictions to build and become regulated. I think the world generally follows the U.S.'s lead on digital assets. Do you think we're going to see that globally? Is people learning from what you've been working on at Treasury, what the SEC's been doing, what other organizations have been doing, departments within the U.S. government in terms of trying to create a more unified global framework led by the United States?
I'm not sure about the more unified global framework. I think it's natural for this sector to have sort of consistent standards across jurisdictions, but even let's take the Genius Act. Within the Genius Act, it imagines that we have sort of this pathway for reciprocal agreements between the United States and other foreign sovereigns. That exists in the reinsurance and the insurance markets. We have covered agreements that we've entered into for insurance because we have a state system of insurance here. I think it's very natural for each jurisdiction to establish a well-regulated regime for the industry and then figure out areas where they need to have coordination and cooperation for cross-border transactions and for interoperability standards. And it's even cybersecurity standards. We obviously have NIST here, and in the United States, if you want to interact or adhere to certain compliance standards for cyber, NIST sets out different standards, and you can meet those standards. We need that in this space so we can project sort of certainty to the rest of the world, and so we can enter into those types of agreements if and when they come to fruition.
Yeah. The President's working group has been calling for clearer rules around custody and trading, especially from the SEC and CFTC. From Treasury's perspective, how realistic is it you think we'll get real clarity on that in the near term?
I think it's surprising. I've been in Washington for a long time. You rarely see such sort of aligned momentum behind a policy issue. And I think there's just sort of this embedded frustration for the past 6-7 years of getting nothing done. And now we're in this posture where there was bipartisan alignment to get Genius done and get it enacted. And we saw that the House passed the Clarity Act with a great deal of bipartisan support. And I heard Senator Lummis up here. I think we'll have that in the Senate. And there's going to be a big push from the administration, from the market regulators to getting something done in the United States. So I think you have to be optimistic if you work in Washington on policy. It's what keeps it sane. So I feel like there's a good chance of it happening.
So let's talk about DeFi for a second. It's a fraught topic because the idea of regulated DeFi Some people think that's an oxymoron, is that DeFi is meant to exist outside of regulatory capture, and existing AML rules don't really fit into the DeFi philosophy, if you will. How's Treasury thinking about striking that balance between encouraging innovation in the DeFi space and making sure enforcement keeps up with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a challenging topic, and like there is no consistent unified definition of like what DeFi is or isn't. And if you read our report that we wrote, you'll maybe read between the lines and see that we like went to great deals of pain to trying to figure out like how we could advance the narrative and advance sort of the policy apparatus around decentralized finance and figure out what control means. And we ended up sort of looking a lot at some of the legislation that had been put into clarity, and then it also put it into the Senate draft, which is the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act. And it basically says like if you're a developer, if you're deploying a non-controlling software product or whatever it might be, that if you don't have functional control over the user's funds, then you're probably not in the business of being a money transmitter. So all of this matters because of the licensing regime that we have at Treasury and because of the state framework for MTLs. So I think what we're trying to do is like explore the pathways of how we can incentivize builders to come back into the United States without sort of the fear and uncertainty of what they're building, whether or not they're a money transmitter, if they're violating some other type of law. So I think success would be like getting something like that into law.
Right. I want to close out by looking out into the future, zooming out a little bit. 5 years from now, what do you hope the relationship is between the digital assets industry and the U.S. government? What does success mean to you over that time frame?
Well, I hope people feel as the relationship today between like the government and the industry is not one built from hostility, is one built from like we want to hear what you have to say. We may not always agree with you, but at least we have an open door policy. You can come and talk to us about what you think and what you're building and what you want or where you think there's uncertainty. So I think success would be like building a stable three-legged stool that we've accomplished all of the things that we've said we've done. We have market structure legislation that's been signed into law. We have genius legislation that's obviously been signed into law and that we have implemented. I think success in 5 years is we have a lot of the offshore entities or a lot of the U.S. companies that have been built offshore come back into the United States. I think that is really important for making the U.S. the crypto capital of the world. And I think it would be that we have a durable framework for this industry to thrive in the United States.
Do you think everything that we've done is durable enough that if political winds shift, that we'll have durable?
I think it's too early to tell. We're 7 months through the administration.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Does it feel like 7 months to you?
There's some extrapolation of dog years in crypto, and then there's like some multiplier effect of it in the government working on crypto. So I think we've accomplished a great deal. We have a lot of work left to accomplish. I am bullish on us getting the work done, but maybe next year we'll do a check-in and see where we are.
All right. Hopefully that check-in, we're all feeling even better than we are now.
Excellent.
But they say in Washington that personnel is policy. And I just want to say the Trump administration, no matter where you sit on the political aisle, the staffing that they've done of key personnel that are overseeing the digital assets industry has been tremendous, including Tyler Williams, counselor to the Secretary of the Treasury for Digital Assets, who's done a tremendous job. And I think it's been 7 months, but he probably feels like it's been 10 years in terms of the hours that he's put in and the work that he's done. So I want to thank Tyler, I want to thank the Secretary and the Treasury Department for being very thoughtful about the way they've approached digital assets. But thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Tyler, for coming out to Jacksonville.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.